For 1,000 years, the galaxy had known peace, not peace born from love or unity, but from exhaustion. The stars once burned with endless wars, empires clashed, planets crumbled and species vanished in the flames of ambition. Then finally came the Accord, a fragile treaty signed on the ruins of a battlefield moon, where leaders of shattered civilizations chose survival over pride. Trade followed. Alliances bloomed. Enemies became neighbors. Knowledge flowed between species once divided by blood. Cultures flourished. Children were born into an age of quiet, never knowing what their ancestors endured. Ancient weapons were locked away. War games were archived. The memory of violence softened until it became little more than a whisper in old history books. And humanity? They vanished. No warning, no message. Earth sealed itself off. Its colonies went dark. Their ships stopped appearing in space. Some believed they were extinct. Others said they were hiding, watching, waiting. Their absence became a mystery wrapped in silence. At first there was curiosity, then confusion, and eventually dismissal. By the 4th century, humanity was little more than a ghost story. By the 7th, even that faded. Human war strategies were removed from simulations. Their name became a placeholder for the unknown. Military academies stopped teaching Terran tactics. Children joked that humans had ascended from boredom. But Earth remained. Silent, distant, dark. So when the Tharnak coalition shattered the Accord and launched its conquest, they didn't fear Earth. Why would they? The legends were gone. The ghosts were silent. They moved through sector after sector with fire and pride, rewriting the map in their name. And still Earth said nothing. Confident, arrogant, the Tharnak leadership sent a direct transmission to humanity. It was a challenge, not a warning. Not a plea. "We know you hear us," the message said. "Your silence no longer protects you. Step forward or be forgotten." There was no reply. No fleet, no ambassadors, no weapons, just laughter. The comm channels, once silent, crackled to life. Across 1,000 systems, one signal echoed. Human laughter. Deep, slow, inevitable. Not joy, not amusement. The kind of laugh that comes from someone who has been waiting for this moment for a very long time. And across the galaxy, that sound didn't just echo, and it was felt. In memories, in old scars, in the minds of those whose ancestors had once known what it meant to face humanity and war. Because laughter was never a joke to them, it was a warning. A storm had begun to stir. And the galaxy, once certain of peace, now remembered what it had chosen to forget. Humans never left, they only waited. The laughter faded, but its echo lingered. In minds, in machines, in silence. Across the stars, it was as if something ancient had awakened. Sensor arrays blinked to life. Long dormant alert systems hummed. On a dozen border worlds, children stopped playing and stared up at the sky, though they didn't know why. And then things began to move. In Sector 9V, a derelict asteroid base thought abandoned for centuries lit up with artificial life. Its shields, cold for over a millennium, shimmered with power. Defense satellites realigned. An old Earth transmission, coded and encrypted, was detected by a passing merchant cruiser. It held no message, just coordinates and a timestamp. In the Helios Drift, a nomadic caravan ship swore it saw a Terran cruiser, sleek, black, and unlike anything in the Accord's registry. It didn't attack. It didn't communicate. It simply passed through their ranks, silent as a ghost, its hull humming like a storm behind glass. The coalition dismissed the reports. Propaganda, they claimed. Psychological warfare. But their admirals began to double patrols. Officers whispered. One fleet commander, once proud, quietly moved his family to an unregistered colony. Another requested retirement. And in war rooms across the galaxy, analysts reviewed old human data. Data once discarded, now with shaking hands. Earth still said nothing. But ships moved. Silent vessels of unknown design appeared in fringe systems. They didn't attack. They didn't respond. They simply watched, observed, recorded. Coalition. Scouts who followed them disappeared. Sensor logs went missing. Black boxes returned with corrupted data, or not at all. And then came the first blow. It was not grand, not cinematic, just a whisper of violence. On the edge of Coalition territory, a weapons facility, vast, armored, deep in the surface of a mountain moon, simply vanished. No explosion, no debris. One moment it existed. The next, it didn't. When investigation teams arrived, They found only a crater of black glass and one symbol burned into stone. A circle with a single vertical line, the old Terran mark for silence. It was not a declaration of war. It was a message, we see you. Across the stars, paranoia bloomed. The coalition, once confident and brash, now stood on edge. Meetings ran late into planetary nights. Fleet movements were doubled. New protocols were enforced. Subspace communication required encryption keys never used in centuries. Something old had returned. Not just an enemy, but a fear of the unknown. Military academies reopened their archives on Terran history. The few instructors who still remembered old stories were suddenly in high demand. Veterans, ancient, forgotten, some even believed dead, were brought out of cryostasis to consult on one simple question. What would the humans do next? None of them had answers. Across the galaxy, more anomalies appeared. Entire listening posts stopped responding. Cargo fleets vanished mid-route. AI networks began reporting unknown interference. Not destructive, but probing, curious. One planetary defense AI described it as being watched by something older than war. In one border system, a Tharnak dreadnought came face-to-face with a Terran ship. But it wasn't a ship. It was a construct, black as the void, shaped like no known vessel. It had no engines, no weapons, no heat signature. It hovered, slowly turning, emitting a deep, rhythmic pulse. The dreadnought's weapons locked on. Its scanners probed. The pulse changed. Suddenly, the dreadnought's systems shut down. Lights failed. Gravity reversed. Officers screamed as the air shimmered. And then a silence. When the ship rebooted 6 hours later, half its crew was gone. There were no signs of struggle. No breach, no biological contamination. Just empty uniforms and a single message left carved into the command deck floor. We remember. The coalition broadcasted nothing. They hid the event. But whispers escaped. Always they escaped. In political halls, fear was masked with anger. In military bunkers, drills were conducted in silence. And on 1,000 worlds, people looked to the stars with a question. What happens when the ghosts of war return not as enemies, but as judges? The offensive began without a single shot fired. Coalition ships stopped responding. Not in battle, not under fire, just silence. Entire fleets vanished without sensor trails or distress signals. Defense grids fell offline without sabotage. Strategic communication hubs were found gutted. Every computer melted from within. And above them, always above them, were the Watchers. Black, unmarked vessels. Unmoving, untouched, unchallenged. They struck with elegance, with patience, with memory. Not to conquer, but to remind. Every move was calculated. The Terrans didn't take territory. They didn't hold ground. They didn't broadcast demands. Instead, they dismantled the infrastructure of war itself. Coalition fuel depots imploded from quantum destabilizers. Ammunition stocks turned to dust. AI war coordinators began self-deleting entire lines of code without explanation. The systems were haunted, and by knowledge, by design, by fear. And still not a single Terran word had been spoken. The galaxy screamed in the silence. In the Accord's capital world, emergency meetings were held daily. Some pleaded for negotiations. Others demanded retaliation. But how do you fight an enemy that does not show themselves? How do you declare war on shadows? One ambassador, trembling, offered a theory. They are not fighting us, she said. They are unmaking the idea of war. And she was right. On one core world, a monument to victory collapsed. Not from bombs, but from beneath. Its foundation melted into nothing. In its place, etched into the soil in cold blue light, was a new message. You forgot us. We remember you. Terror was no longer confined to soldiers and statesmen. Civilians began to panic. Cities turned their lights inward. Spaceports emptied, and still the Terrans said nothing. But the galaxy finally understood. Silence was not absence, it was strategy. For centuries, Earth had remained silent, its voice buried beneath the weight of mystery, legend and myth. But now, after shadowed warnings and quiet devastations, the time came when humanity no longer whispered through symbols or silence. They spoke. It began with a single transmission, narrowband, analog, impossibly archaic, broadcast on a frequency no longer used by any modern species. The message was clear, unmistakable, and chilling. You broke the accord. You will pay the price. Not in war, not in death, in understanding. The voice was unmistakably human, calm, emotionless. yet carrying a weight that made hardened generals sweat. Across the coalition, the signal reached every command center, every ship, every screen. The language translated itself, bending to every dialect. It wasn't merely heard. It was absorbed. Then came the images. Not threats, not propaganda, memories. The transmission showed what the galaxy had forgotten. The Terran Wars. Footage long thought erased. Entire fleets, turning to ash under human strategy. Planets falling not from brute force but from tactics decades in planning. Alliances crumbling from infiltration. Species surrendering not out of fear but because resistance became meaningless. Then it showed something new. Not destruction but rebuilding. Cities of glass and harmony. Worlds healed under Terran science. Diplomacy carried out with empathy. Children from once warring species playing together. A glimpse of what could have been. What had been lost when the coalition turned its back on Earth. The message ended with one final sentence. You feared our war. You should have feared our silence. And then, Earth sent coordinates, not as a threat but an invitation. A neutral planet, a meeting point. A single word accompanying the location. Talk. The galaxy trembled. Was this mercy? A trap, a test? The coalition fractured in debate. Some leaders saw a chance for redemption, others a final bluff before annihilation. Yet no one could deny the truth anymore. Earth had returned not as a conqueror but as a judge. The world chosen for the meeting was nameless, a neutral rock floating between two dying stars. No cities, no satellites, no life, just silence once again. The coalition arrived first. Dozens of ships hovered above the surface, bristling with weapons though none dared aim them. Diplomats were chosen carefully and the youngest, the most articulate, the most untainted by the war. They wore robes of peace and faces of fear. Then Earth arrived, not with fleets, not with weapons, just one ship. It was small, almost humble, no markings, no escorts. It descended silently like a memory returning home. When it landed, its ramp opened, but no one stepped out. Instead, the air changed. A presence settled over the gathered delegations, not visible, not measurable, but undeniable. Some felt awe, others dread. A few dropped to their knees, weeping, unsure why. Finally, one figure stepped forward from the human ship. They were not armored. They carried no weapons. They were not enhanced by cybernetics or cloaked in technology. Just a human, plain, old, and silent. They walked slowly toward the center of the delegation. Where the coalition leaders waited, the silence stretched so long it felt sacred. Then the human spoke. You remember our violence, but not our reasons. That is your failure. The coalition ambassador tried to respond. A speech prepared, full of apologies and defenses, but the human raised a hand. This is not a court. You are not on trial. We do not want your guilt. We want your awareness. Behind them, the skies shifted. Holograms lit up the atmosphere, not of destruction, but of potential. What the galaxy could become if it stopped repeating the same mistakes. Images of peace earned, not enforced. We don't demand tribute, the human said. We offer memory. And with that, they turned and walked back to their ship. The ramp closed. The ship rose, slow and quiet, and vanished into the stars, leaving nothing behind but silence and understanding. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy truly listened. After the meeting, no official treaty was signed. No declarations made. No war ended because there was no war to end. What Earth had delivered was not a ceasefire. It was a mirror. And the galaxy had seen itself and fractured, proud and still chasing the ghosts of conquest. In the weeks that followed, change didn't come from commands or councils. It came from whispers, from reflections, from the silent reckoning now echoing through every corridor of power. On the outer rim, a Tharnic fleet disbanded itself, its captains resigning, one by one, refusing to lead another generation into hollow glory. On Core World 8, an entire academy of war strategy was repurposed into an institute for diplomacy. Its motto was etched in Terran script: understand before you defend. Civilians, too, changed. Where once war monuments stood, now grew gardens. Where once victory parades echoed, children painted murals of peace, inspired by the images Earth had shown. Those who had mocked the old Terran myths now found themselves quoting them in new languages. Even in the shadows where hatred still festered, something shifted. A fear once born from superiority had been replaced by reverence. because the galaxy finally understood what the Terrans had meant. True power doesn't come from destruction, but from restraint. Earth had not conquered, it had reminded, and those reminders were more effective than fleets, more lasting than fire. They had struck deeper than any laser, rooted in memory, stitched into legacy. A new age didn't begin with banners or fireworks. It began with silence, and that silence spoke louder than war ever could. Years passed. The Terrans did not return, not in ships, not in messages. Their one appearance had been like a ripple in still water, powerful but brief. And yet the galaxy had not been the same since. In that silence, something extraordinary happened. Peace lasted, not because of fear, not because of dominance, but because memory took root. Generations born after the event grew up learning not just about war, but about its weight, about the cost of forgetting. Schools taught not the glory of victory, but the wisdom of restraint. Leaders stopped asking, "How do we win?" and began asking, "Why must we fight?" The coalition fractured, but not in collapse. In transformation. Old empires became collectives. Border disputes were settled with debates, not bombardments. Military budgets were halved. The greatest investment became memory, libraries, museums, and orbital memorials dedicated not to heroes, but to lessons. And in every one of those halls there was always a section for Earth. A single plaque, identical in every language, engraved in Terran steel. We were here. We saw what you became, and we chose to believe you could be more. Pilgrims came, from all species, from all systems, not to worship but to witness. Some cried, some prayed, some simply stood in silence, because they all knew peace had not come because Earth demanded it. It came because humanity reminded them they were capable of it, and somewhere far beyond the charted stars on a planet called Earth, humanity watched, not as rulers, not as gods, but as guardians of silence.